Before we begin today's episode, it's important that I put some context around it. I spoke to Abby from Death Valley National Park back in August 2023. It was 11 days after Southern California was hit by a hurricane. Death Valley had major damage. We went ahead and recorded the episode and then intentionally held it and hoping the park would start to open again. I'm happy to share that they have begun to reopen parts of the park. But before planning your trip to Death Valley or any park, please visit the park's official website for information on the park's status. You can find Death Valley's website linked in the episode notes on theparkspodcast.com. Now, enjoy the episode. Our journey takes us to the lowest elevation in the United States and the hottest place on Earth. Grab your water and join me as we explore Death Valley National Park. I'm your host, Missy Rentz, and this is the Parks Podcast. I'm excited today to welcome Abby Wines, who's a park ranger at Death Valley National Park. Prior to Death Valley, she also worked at Wind Cave National Park, Great Basin National Park, Sequoia National Park, Carlsbad Cavern National Park, among others. Abby, welcome to the Parks Podcast.
Thank you very much, Missy.
So we start each episode where I kind of go through park stats and give people some basic understanding of the park. For Death Valley National Park, it is located in Death Valley, California. It's the 53rd national park and was made a park on October 31st, 1994, when Bill Clinton was president of the United States. However, it was designated a national monument in 1933. It is 3.4 million acres and the fifth largest national park in the Park Service system. The highest elevation is 11,049 feet, and that's Telescope Peak Summit. The lowest elevation is 282 feet below sea level, which is Badwater Basin, and I cannot wait to talk about that place. And in 2022, there were 1,128,862 visitors. Some other fun facts to know: Death Valley is the hottest place on Earth. There are more than 170 miles of hiking trails, and animals that you may come across on your visit to Death Valley are bighorn sheep, kangaroo rats, desert tortoise, coyotes, jackrabbits, and most of these are nocturnal, meaning they choose to sleep during the day and avoid those hot days. Abby, I had so much fun reminiscing my time at Death Valley and doing research. I think I could probably have 4 or 5 episodes with you. There's so many stories to tell about this park. But to start off, I just want to make it very current. This is August 2023, and Death Valley was just flooded by a hurricane that hit California. So how are you, and how is Death Valley?
I'm exhausted. All of the staff here are exhausted. We're now 11 days after Hurricane Hillary passed through. The hurricane dropped 2.2 inches of rain at Furnace Creek on the valley floor, which is more than we get in a year, and it's by far the single rainiest day we've ever had. Higher elevation areas in the park received up to 8 inches of rain in the day.
Wow.
And Death Valley usually gets about 2 inches. So what that does is created extensive flash flooding. For people that maybe live in the East and think about what it's like when a river or an ocean floods, it's very different when the landscape here floods. Think about how the steep roof of a house functions, where water runs off of that rather than soaking into it. That's like the steep mountains that are on either side of Death Valley that are very rocky and have hard packed soil and very few vegetation and not much opportunity for the rain to soak in. And then your rain gutter and spout are very much like the canyons funneling that down. But what is below all of those canyons are the roadways that go north and south and across the park. And so every time where one of those flash floods coming down at Canyon went across a road, it either deposited up to 5 feet of debris of rocks on top of the road, or more problematic is when it flows across the road and carves out the downhill side, kind of like a little waterfall, and erodes
Wow.
back under the pavement, leaving asphalt sticking out over nothing, or big holes and drop offs in the road. So we're still dealing with that. And at 11 days since the flood, we have no idea when we're going to open the first part of the park. It will reopen in phases. So I recognize that podcasts live forever, and someone might be listening to this years from now, or they might be listening to this a month from now. But best thing to do is to go to the park's website, which is www.nps.gov/DEVA for Death Valley. And that will get you the current information about what areas of the park are open.
I was thrilled to see updates on your Instagram today that the pupfish have done well in this. In fact, maybe even thrived in some situations.
So pupfish are these tiny little fish that are less than 2 inches long, and there are five distinct populations of them that are either distinct subspecies or distinct species. The one that's of greatest concern for us are the devil's hole pupfish. And devil's hole is a sinkhole, so it's this 50-foot deep hole, and then at the bottom of that is where the water is, and then there's 500 feet vertically of water below that down into a cave. The pupfish really rely upon a shelf at the very top of that pool of water that is the only place that it gets sunlight. And the flooding deposited debris on top of that shelf. So in the short run, it's not good for the pupfish because there were probably some eggs that got smushed
Mm.
and it's covering up the algae that they eat. But in the long run, it's very good for the devil's hole pupfish because that flooding brought in fresh nutrients, which will help future generations.
Is this the only place in the world where there are the pupfish?
There are different species of pupfish that
Okay.
live in other areas of North America, but Devil's Hole is the only place that the Devil's Hole pupfish lives. And a few years ago, they were down to a total of 35 fish.
Wow.
So, real concern. Then another species of the pupfish here are the Salt Creek pupfish. And we know that some individual fish didn't survive that flood. But again, as a whole, for the population, the flooding is not a problem and probably a slight benefit to them.
I'm glad they're doing okay in the long run. But just before we get into the bigger conversation, just want to reiterate that don't go to Death Valley National Park right after you listen to this. Use all the information that we're going to talk about to plan your trip and visit the Death Valley National Park website, which we will link to from the notes on this podcast too, to get updates on the phased opening. Okay, so Death Valley is a pretty young park. It's only 29 years old. And what was it about this area that made it so important to designate it as a national park?
Death Valley is really special for its dramatic desert scenery. Extreme differences in elevation, as Missy you mentioned in the introduction, from negative 282 feet up to 11,049 feet. So dramatic steep mountains over white flat valleys on the floor, and all of the variety of habitats and human history that goes along with such a variety of elevations. It's gorgeous.
It is, I did not come to Death Valley with a plan. It was really, I had originally planned on coming later in my journeys, but I was escaping a snowstorm from southern Utah when I came to Death Valley. And I got there and I was like, why am I here? It's just rocks, just gray rocks. And then the sunset and the rocks
Mhm.
turned purple and green and orange. And the next day I went on a hike and there's a waterfall. And I mean, it is just so diverse. And I kind of fell in love with it after that. So I was glad for the surprise visits, but it's a beautiful park. I didn't
Yeah,
get it.
well, your experience of it's at first thinking that it was kind of blah, and then the angle of the light changed and it just popped. That is totally, what a lot of people experience. So I feel really sorry for people that just drive through the park, maybe for 2 hours from 12 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and all they're getting is that vertical overhead sunlight. Things don't look that interesting here, but early in the morning, late in the afternoon, when the sun's at a low angle and all those canyons and the shadows and the sand dunes and the colors come out, and that's when it is just drop dead gorgeous. So
It
you have to
was
plan to be here.
it was such a good life lesson to give things a chance to find the beauty in everything. And I think about it in most parks I go to when I'm like, oh, it's another tree. And it's just my own personal mindset. I just need to take a
Mhm.
second. It was a park that surprised me. And now that I've done more research, I saw such a tiny bit of it in the 4 days I was there that I have to come back for some of the stories we're about to get into. Um, so tell me, how did it get its name?
Death Valley got its name when there were a group of people trying to get to California's gold rush in 1849, and they came through Death Valley. They had a hard time finding their way out the other side. After a couple of months, they finally got out, and one of them turned around, and this woman said, "Goodbye, Death Valley." One person had died. He was old and sick. He would have died no matter where he was. We don't deserve the name. And for the record, the Shoshone, who are the people that have lived here since time immemorial, they do not like that this is called Death Valley. For them, this is a place of life. This is their homeland, and it's
Oh.
sacred.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I'm gonna think of that. In previous episodes, we've talked a lot about the different designations of parks where there's the park and the monument and whatever. When I was reading a lot about Death Valley, they talk about all of the land that's designated as wilderness.
Uh-huh.
Could you just explain a little bit to us the difference between the national park and wilderness space?
Right. So, wilderness is an extra layer of protection on top of the protection offered by land being part of a national park. In reality, I would say there is not a whole lot of difference here.
Okay.
It would prevent us from developing areas. That means you can't ride a bicycle someplace, but you can't ride a bicycle anywhere off trail in the park anyway.
Okay. All right. I feel that that is a similar answer on a lot of things that for me as just a citizen who comes to visit the park, it can all be just part of the national park. I don't have to necessarily do anything differently when
Mhm.
coming. Okay.
Right.
So is it fair like a lot of maybe you could tell me a little bit more about what was in Death Valley prior to it becoming a park cuz a lot of the things I look at it feels like it was very much a mining community.
Right. So before it became a park, depends when you want to start in
Well,
timeline.
true. Good.
The Timisha Shoshone have always lived here, and they had seasonal places they would live. So they'd live down in the valley floor in the winter and then move up into the mountains to 5,000 feet or so where it's cooler and spend their summers up there. So that's what it was like here for a very, very long time. Then starting in the mid to late 1800s, there were miners coming through trying to find their mineral that they could sell off, and more often than not, it was intentionally a scam. And they might have found a little bit of gold here or a little bit of borax there, but mostly they were mining investors back east who were too scared of the name Death Valley to come out here and check if they were investing in anything that was actually worthwhile. Then one of the mining companies that was successful, which was one of the borax mining companies, also realized how beautiful this place was and decided to start making money off tourists. So they built the first hotel in the park and in the 20s and then started lobbying for Death Valley to become a national park. Partly so they wouldn't have competition, and partly so that there would be better advertising.
They're smart.
But so Death Valley became a national monument in 1933, and at that point, it was about 2 million acres in size, so pretty large, and then got expanded to a national park in 1994 at 3.4 million acres.
So was there ever much mining done there or it was all just stories?
It's a really a combination of both things. So when you talk about the history of a place that's the size of a state, there's a lot of different stories to tell. There were some mines that were very productive, gold mines such as Keen Wonder Mine. There was the talc mines in Warm Springs Canyon that at one point were the largest talc mines in the country. And then borax is the main thing that people made money off here, especially in the 1890s to the 19 teens or so is when that was really big in Death Valley. Um, but then there were also the scams. So Leadfield, an entire town, which is now a ghost town, built as a scam to scam investors into putting money into it. And then Death Valley Scotty.
So one of the people I wanted to talk about was Albert Mussey Johnson, and I guess Scotty kind of swindled him as well. I thought it was just over this ranch that is now named the Scotty Castle, but it sounds like there was a lot more going on there.
Yes. So around 1902, Scotty started his scam. He claimed to have a gold mine in Death Valley. He never even had a hole in the ground, but Death Valley was the smartest place to have an imaginary fraudulent gold mine because with the name, who's going to come check you out? So he had multiple investors, mostly from New York and from Chicago. One of them, Albert Johnson, called his bluff and told him he was coming out to inspect the gold mine, which was a huge problem for Scotty because he didn't have anything to show him. So he got together his friends, his brothers, and they staged an ambush. One of the people who was involved in this was Bill Keys of Keys Ranch down in Joshua Tree, for any listeners that might have been there. But anyway, they what was supposed to happen is that they were gonna hide behind a hillside, and when the wagon with Johnson and Scotty came below them, they were supposed to shoot their guns in the air and just make noise and be threatening, and this rich man from Chicago would be so scared he'd go back home. What actually happened is they shot one of the people, probably because they were drunk. So they shot one of the Scotty's brothers in the hip, and when that happened, Scotty dropped his gun and stopped firing back and yelled, "Stop shooting! You shot Warner." And they came down and apologized. So clearly, the rich man, Albert Johnson, figured out at this point that there was no gold mine, that everything was a scam when the pretend bandits are listening to Scotty. But that's where the story gets weird because he didn't care. So he was having so much fun living out this kind of Wild West fantasy out here in the extreme part of the West, Death Valley, that he kept investing in Scotty's gold mine
Oh,
and
is he?
kept coming out on future visits and eventually brought his wife, and she got tired of camping. So a couple 20 years later or so is when they started building Scotty's Castle as a vacation home for themselves. They named it Death Valley Ranch. Scotty said it was Scotty's Castle, and they let him go with that because it was a fun story.
That's incredible. And the castle is still there.
Yes.
It is not open obviously right now because of the park of the flooding. Is
Mhm.
that was it open previously or was because I read something about another flood that happened several years ago.
Right, this seems to be too much of a repeat event for us. So
Yeah.
in 2015, there was a flood that did not hit the entire park like this one this year, but was extremely severe in the canyon where Scotty's Castle is. And that did extensive damage to the road, to the utilities, and to some of the buildings there. We are at this point 90% done with the repairs we need to do and hope to reopen either in 2025 or 2026, depending on the
Okay.
last project that we don't totally have lined up yet.
The pictures, it's just beautiful. Just to
Yeah.
go on and kind of do a visual tour of it is really just stunning on the website.
Mhm.
That's a hilarious story, I like that. And then the other thing that I've kind of become obsessed with and intrigued by in these state and national parks are the ghost towns.
Mm.
And you have several in Death Valley. Maybe you could share a little bit about what guests can find when they wanna visit some ghost towns there.
Sure. So there are ghost towns in the park. Unfortunately, they might be a little bit less substantial than what people are expecting. Because
Okay.
what happened here is that the towns grew and died often within less than a year. And so people came in, they were living in tents or they were living in thrown together wood shacks. And then when the mining fell apart in the spot where they were, or they realized it was a scam to begin with, and then they heard about this other spot 50 miles away, 20 miles away, and they pack up the entire building and move over there.
Okay.
So one of my favorite ghost towns in the park is Panamint City. That's a great backpacking route. It's about 6 miles from the trailhead to get up there, and there is water along the whole route. So that's another reason why it's a great backpacking route. But that's a ghost town from the 1870s, and there are a lot of building foundations in the low walls, as well as a chimney that's 70 feet tall that's still there.
Okay.
Then Skidoo, Leadfield are a couple other ghost towns in the park, but there's a really spectacular one just outside the park on BLM land that's worth tacking on to a visit to Death Valley. That's called Rhyolite. It's near Beatty, Nevada. And that's just a short side trip from Death Valley and well worth the effort.
Okay.
Really cool buildings there.
I'll put a link in the webpage about it. Thank you. The other thing I was reading, you guys were recently awarded a grant to run a program to preserve the stories of women in the park, how they lived and the role that they played in the park, which I think is incredible.
Mhm.
Why is it important for you all to have gone through this process of preserving this information and then telling these stories?
All right. So, very often when people think about history in general or Western history, the actions that men took is what people think of forefront and don't and think of women as just, oh, they were along the way and they cooked the meals. But some women that really had a huge impact here, there was a woman named Mary de Decker who was a botanist that really pioneered are basically discovering new species here in Death Valley that are endemic and live no place else. And she was the first one to identify several of those. There's a woman named Louise Grantham who was frankly not a very nice person, but an interesting person in that she was a woman mining entrepreneur running that large talc camp or talc mining operation in the park. And then another woman I really respect within the park is a woman named Pauline Esteves, who is an elder in the Timbisha Shoshone tribe. And she was instrumental in having the tribe be recognized as a tribe formally, and then in passing the Timbisha Shoshone Homeland Act in 2000, which gives the tribe co management with the National Park Service over about two-thirds of the park.
Oh, wow. That's impressive. And you do a great job of telling the story of these women on the website. Is there any exhibit or anything in the park that is talking about them?
We have a temporary exhibit in one of the rooms in Furnace Creek Visitor Center.
Okay, great. It's a great spot to visit. Now, in planning a trip to the park, so I started this podcast because I got asked all the time or commented all the time, like, I don't even know how to have a picnic in a park. How can I even
Mhm.
plan a trip? And so I want to help people better understand how they can plan their trip to Death Valley when it's open. When it's
Right.
open. Timing is key because your
Mhm.
seasons are so drastic. When is the prime time to come, or when would you plan a trip to come to the park?
Right. The months when you're going to have great weather would be November through March. October and April are a little on the warm side, but still possible then. And if you're coming in the summer, like July or August, that's just going to be to check off your bucket list and say you experience your lifetime hottest temperature ever. We get up to 130 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's in the shade. So
Mm.
that's not a time when you want to be camping here.
No.
Digress a little bit. So the winter is a great time to come, and our temperatures then are usually a high in the 60s or 70s. And so it's maybe a low in the 40s. So great camping weather, great hiking weather. And that's when it's miserably cold in so much of the rest of the country. So come to Death Valley then.
But there are areas that get snow in the winter in
Oh,
the park.
yes, definitely. So with mountains up to 11,000 feet, is snow in parts of the park, and they're beautiful. But most of the park that people, where the developed areas are, where the roads are, and most of the hiking trails are at lower elevations. So
I
you're not going to get stuck in snow.
Yeah, no, I just love the diversity of it, that you can have it be 130 degrees, but also get snow 6 months later. And you
Mhm.
can tell because it's so lush in those areas, which is very different. So you get to the park, you go to the ranger station, you learn a little bit about what you're gonna do, where you're gonna sleep, and the lodging.
Right.
There's a lot of options in Death Valley.
Right. There are 3 hotels within the park. 2 of them are privately owned on private land surrounded by the park, and 1 is a concession where it is managed and regulated by the National Park Service. So those options are the Oasis at Death Valley, Stovepipe Wells Resort, and Panamint Springs Resort. However, they will all be fully booked in March, for example, and they'll all be fully booked over Thanksgiving weekend and Christmas to New Year's. So, another key to finding room in the hotels is to travel in an off-peak time. So everybody else knows it's great in Death Valley in the winter. They're all coming here then. But if you have the luxury of traveling in December or January, other than a holiday weekend, you will have trails almost totally to yourself. It's
Okay.
really a great time to be here. The weather's ideal and visitation is low.
Is booking done on recreation.gov?
No, the hotels are not booked that way. You would have to do
Private.
research and find each one
Yeah.
individually. There
Okay.
isn't a central spot for the hotels. And then camping within the park, most of our campgrounds are only first come, first serve. There's only one campground that is reservable in advance on recreation.gov. The one that is reservable in advance is Furnace Creek Campground. That one will usually show fully booked, especially during the really popular times of spring break and those winter holidays. But most of the time, there's going to be room in a campground, just might not be as nice. We have this campground that is a half mile away from that one called Sunset Campground, right here in the core of the park at Furnace Creek. But Sunset Campground has 270 sites, and it is more or less infinitely expandable beyond that. We had one night during our super bloom back in 2016 where we had 500 sites paid for in Sunset Campground. And I don't know how many other people were just poaching it. So our campgrounds are almost infinitely expandable. And that is good news for people that are last minute planners.
Yeah, I ended up doing one night in Sunset and then getting up early and stalking Texas Spring to find a
Mhm.
spot that had some trees on it.
So Sunset Campground, as I said, it's always has room, but it is just a big open gravel lot. It's good for RVers, not as pleasant for a tent camper. The one that's a lot nicer is right next door, and it's called Texas Springs Campground. There are trees in there and stone structures built by the Civilian Conservation Corps.
And some of the most helpful hosts I've ever met were at Texas Springs. It was lovely. I was also there during a dust storm, so I went with this
Mhm.
intention of tent camping and spent most of my time in the evenings in the car because of the dust storm, but they're lovely facilities, and you all have bathrooms, which is really nice and I think good to point out to people
Yep.
for them. A little bit, if we could talk a little bit about safety in Death Valley, and I'm talking more about there's such extreme temperatures and very different hiking there. And so maybe if you could give us some tips on how do you address safety as you're preparing for a trip to the park?
Sure. And I'd say the first thing to realize is that there is not cell phone service in most of park. So, good things to have would be some sort of a satellite messenger, an inReach or a satellite phone, any of those things. Well, most people don't have those. So, if you don't have those, have someone back home that loves you and is going to miss you and have a check in time. Give them your itinerary, tell them where you're going, and tell them if you don't get in touch with them by such and such time, here's the car you're driving, here's the trail you're going to take, and then ask them to call the park. We can't check on everybody. If we see a car on the side of the road, we don't know if they were intentionally backpacking or they're out there lost. So be responsible for your own check in, is first thing I'd say. After that, heat in the summer is obviously a huge issue here in Death Valley with temperatures that reach 130 degrees in the shade. And at those temperatures, we don't advise that anyone walk more than 5 minutes away from air conditioning. So just tour the car on the paved road or tour the park on paved roads and do little walks, like maybe out to Badwater is a risky point, but no extended hikes. Really, once it gets to be summer, it's too hot here. Can hike at the mountains and out higher elevation in the summer, though. And then other things as far as safety and drinking enough water is really important. There are, of course, animals that can be dangerous. There's rattlesnakes, for example, scorpions, but they really don't cause many problems. It's usually driving. I should have started with that also. Our biggest loss of life here in the park are single vehicle rollover accidents. People that are just not paying attention and they get one wheel off a side, overcorrect, get back on the pavement, and then flip on the other side. So pay attention when you're driving. We all overlook that because it's something we do all the time,
Yeah.
but that's the most dangerous thing anyone does in Death Valley National Park.
I also think that you guys have a lot of printed maps of trails, and I think it's key to
Mhm.
take a printed map because you don't have cell signal. I think that was really helpful to me. And the other thing I did get lost when I was there on one of my trails. I can say that now that I'm back and my mom's not gonna come undone on that. But
Yeah.
but I am an experienced hiker, but one of the things is I think it's so important to be an active hiker. And in that, I mean, like pay attention to landmarks because as
Mhm.
soon as I was like, this doesn't feel right, I turned back and within, 20 minutes or 30 minutes was back where I needed to go. But you have to kind of be very present when you're on
Mhm.
unfamiliar trails. And the trails I went on, I know there are some in Death Valley that are more traditional, that they're, packed ground, but the trails I went on were more rocks and sand, and that can be a little bit more difficult to hike on.
We have very few actual maintained trails. So
Okay.
it's only a few of them. Mostly what's cool, one of the things that's amazing about Death Valley is that you can walk anywhere.
Yeah.
So you park on the side of the road and go, that looks interesting over there. I want to check out that canyon and just go. You don't have to be on a maintained trail. Also, maintaining a trail here in Death Valley is really hard because most of the routes we would go up are up washes and canyons that flood every year. So There aren't too many maintained trails. Even better reason, like you said, to maintain your situational awareness, pay attention to where you are.
You said it better than I did. I like that situational awareness. There's a lot to see and do in this park, and we've already talked about some things there. We would need, like I said, 10 episodes to be able to tell everything. But let's talk a little bit about things to see, kind of key attractions in the park. What are your top picks?
Yeah. So some of the great things that you can see either from a road or a very short walk from the road would be Dante's View, where you're at a high point and get this amazing panoramic view of the entire park. Then down lower is Zabriskie Point. Badwater, that's the salt flat that's 282 feet below sea level. And if you walk out a few minutes into the salt flat, the salt is fractured into these massive polygons. It's just this really bizarre landscape and really stark white compared to the dark mountains around it. Mesquite Flat sand dunes, although only 4% of the park are sand dunes. Sand dunes are really beautiful. Artist Drive, and then as far as a hike, the 2 that I would recommend that are short and would give you a variety of landscapes would be Golden Canyon and Mosaic Canyon. They're extremely different from each other and both are beautiful.
Okay. When you said Artist Drive, is that where Artist Palette is?
Yes, Artist
That
Palace
was
spot in the road, yeah.
Oh, that was beautiful. It's just a great place to see the different colors. I had no idea rocks could be so
Mhm.
many different colors.
Yeah.
And then also there's a ton to do there. We've
Mhm.
talked a little bit about the hiking, but there's a golf course, there's a
Mhm.
ton of bikers. When I was there, tons of cyclists were out on the roads. Can you tell us a little bit about other things to do in the park?
Right, so hiking, bicycling, those are some of the main activities, driving around, sightseeing, but something to not overlook is stargazing.
Oh,
Death Valley is an international dark sky park. And if you're here at a time when the moon is not up, then you're going to be treated to seeing the Milky Way itself. Just seeing that, what looks like a cloud, a stripy cloud, but it's actually a field of stars. And so stargazing is another one.
you're so lucky that you get to be here all the time. Do the ranger programs cover things like stargazing too?
Yes. So we do have ranger talks regularly. The night ones for stargazing will only do at the times when it's going to be peak
Okay.
visibility, basically when the moon's not out.
Yeah.
And those can be extremely popular.
Yeah.
We had one astronomy event last year that we had 1,500 people show up for.
Wow. That's impressive. The other thing that I think is fascinating, I just keep going through the list. The number of movies filmed in Death Valley is huge, but there is a Star Wars self-guided tour.
Right, Star Wars is probably the most famous of the movies that were filmed here. So, Death Valley is Tatooine. It's the sandy planet that Luke's from. So sections were filmed at Mesquite Flat Sands over by Stovepipe Wells, also in Golden Canyon, 20 Mule Team Canyon, and Dante's View that I mentioned earlier. That's scene where Luke is talking to Obi-Wan and he's looking down and I forget the name of the village on this planet. He's like, that's a den of villainy and thieves. And he's pointing towards Furnace Creek at that point. So
Oh, that's
yeah, that's a
awesome.
fun thing. And The Mandalorian was not filmed here, but they filmed a lot of the background footage for that at Zabriskie Point.
Okay. Oh, it's fascinating. How about for those of us who like to bring our four-legged friends? Are they welcome at Death Valley?
So pets are some you probably would be happier if you leave your pets at home. The
Yes.
pets are only allowed in campgrounds and on roads. They are not allowed on trails. They are not allowed cross country. And that really limits what you can see in the park. Also, for much of the year, it's too hot to leave pets in cars.
Yes. I agree with you on that one. To wrap up each conversation, I do a speed round. Just some quick questions. Would love you to answer with the first thing that comes to your mind. What is your earliest park memory?
Mammoth Cave National Park, and it's why I'm a park ranger.
What made you love the parks?
Exploration. I wanted to be a cave explorer. And so I did an internship at Wind Cave National Park thinking that the internship was exploring caves. And it turns out I was being an interpretive park ranger. No one told me the difference. Anyway,
What is your favorite thing about Death Valley National Park?
The open space feels like freedom.
What is your favorite thing to do at Death Valley National Park?
Canyoneering. And if you're not familiar with that, that means rappelling down cliffs.
Wow. What park have you yet to visit but is on your bucket list and why?
Mm. I would love to go to the Alaska ones that I've not been to yet, like Gates of the Arctic.
What are three must haves that you pack for a park visit?
Oh, a map, food, and water.
Good three. What is your favorite campfire activity?
Oh, just talking with friends.
Tent, camper, or cabin?
Tent, but I prefer sleeping in the back of my truck.
Hiking with or without trekking poles?
Usually with, especially if it's steep.
What is your favorite trail snack?
Chocolate.
What is what is the best animal sighting that you've seen?
Oh, so many years ago, it was about 17 years ago here, I was working on a project with two of the elders from the Shoshone tribe. And the younger elder asked the elder where the rock art was in the area that we were. And so the elder woman, the older elder, said, I was taught not to go to these places of power, but you two can go over. And she showed us where to walk. And so the Timbisha woman and I were walking over towards this rock art panel, which is a 20-foot tall white cliff with petroglyphs on it. And there was a mountain lion sitting on top of that in the middle of the day.
Oh, wow. That's impressive. What is your favorite sound in the park?
Silence,
And what is the greatest gift that the parks give to us?
peace.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation and learning more about Death Valley, and it is definitely going back on my revisit list.
Great talking with you, Missy. Let me know when you come out.
I absolutely will. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Till next time, we'll see you in the parks. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to like and share on your favorite podcast platform. Music for the Parks podcast is written, performed, and produced by Porter Hardy. For more information, please follow us on Instagram at The Parks Podcast or visit our website at theparkspodcast.com.